Show starts here in about 30 to 45 seconds. Real Talk with Keith Smith, the Friday edition. We are very excited to welcome the esteemed Valerie Long, a partner at Williams Mullen, to the program. The show live streaming on every social media platform known to mankind, archived wherever you get your podcasts as well. Judah Wickower is the director of our Fine and Fair talk show. You get some props, Judah. I try to make sure we do that. LinkedIn, jump in with questions. Twitter, jump in with questions. Facebook, this airs on 15 pages, 15 Twitter accounts. Spotify, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, TikTok, Snapchat, jump in with conversation, with questions. It's the water cooler of Charlottesville, the I Love CVille network, where viewers and listeners come to learn about what is happening in the community. Keith, before we start the program, my friend, how you feeling over there?
I am feeling good, man. I'll tell you what, I'm honored to sit to the right of, or to the left actually, of Valerie. We've seen each other at board meetings. We've had great discussions, but we've never really sat down and had a deep dive conversation. So that's what we're going to do today about something we're both passionate about. Well, all three of us are passionate about is housing in our region, and I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to getting an education. I brought my pen and my notepad. It's not as big as yours, but I got a notepad and a pen, and we're going to have a chat. I'm really looking forward to it.
Ladies and gentlemen, give the show a like and a share anywhere you're watching. Twitter, how about a retweet? Lonnie Murray, welcome to the program. Katie Pearl, hello and welcome to the program. The attorney, Nathan King, welcome to the program. Heather Walker in Johnson Village, hello. Carol Thorpe, the Queen of Jack Jewett, hello. Kyle Irvin, Communications Director, Charlottesville Police Department, hello. Kyle Miller, the real estate investor, hello. Johnny Ornalis, the owner of Guadalajara and El Mariachi, hello. Scott Thorpe, hello. Olivia Branch in Keswick, hello. Andre Xavier, hello. Seth Liskey, the real estate investor in Stanton, hello and welcome to the program. Brian Yeagle of Farm Bureau Insurance, hello. Valerie, welcome to the program. Valerie Young, the talented broker, investor, and agent. I see 7 real estate firms watching the program. Neil Williamson, the president of the Free Enterprise Forum. Dean Russell of Ross Mortgage, hello. Jeffrey Fogel, the attorney, welcome to the program. Just a few of our many viewers and listeners. Judah Wickower, we can rock and roll when you're ready, my friend. Good Friday morning, guys. My name is Jerry Miller, and this is Real Talk with Keith Smith on the I Love CVille network. In our building, the Macklin Building on Market Street in downtown Charlottesville, a show today presented by Yes Realty Partners. Real Talk with Keith Smith has turned into just a fantastic epicenter of real estate, of zoning, of land use, of investing. Just the insider and the pros perspective of real estate and entrepreneurship in this community. You, the viewer and listener, can ask questions. You can shape the discussion. You can offer your perspective on any of the social channels you're watching upon. Just put the questions in the feed, and our proprietary software will aggregate all your commentary into one place. So very excited for today's program. Judah Wickower, if we can go to the studio camera, and let's welcome someone who needs very little introduction. No, not you, Keith Smith.
Damn.
Valerie Long, a partner at Williams Mullen, live on air. Keith and Valerie, good Friday morning to you guys.
So you mean it's not about me?
It's always about you, Keith.
Damn.
So you look great, Keith.
Thank you for boosting my ego. So Valerie, thank you for joining us. Like I said, we said in the intro on the way in, we see each other in meetings and hallways, and we have brief little conversations, and we geek out a little bit, and then you go your way and I go my way. But thank you for agreeing to sit down with us. I know your time is very valuable, and what I wanted to do is take a deep dive into what we're passionate about, which is housing, and can we make a difference, can we not? We're going to take a deep dive into our 400 and something pages of...
How much did that cost you to print, Keith? Put it up on screen so they can see.
Yeah.
This is the zoning Bible right here.
Is Yona watching?
Yona is watching. The draft zoning ordinance Bible right
I can't tell you how much I paid for it.
Well,
then.
I have it too, except I was not smart enough to print mine double-sided. So mine is bigger than yours,
so
but that's
big.
the only reason. But mine has tabs, more tabs than you do.
Valerie, will you hold yours up? I mean, is that 15 pounds right there?
Pretty much.
I mean,
I had to go up to the bigger binder to do that, and my biceps are getting a workout carrying it to and from work every day.
Respect.
And carrying it around town. So
in my
it's very
case-
helpful to have it printed out. So I respect that, Keith.
We're old school because I need to
Exactly.
hold it in my hand and look at it. And the good news is it's got pictures in it
Yes.
for guys like me, so we can
Yes.
go ahead and get it. But I wanted to take a little bit of deep dive into it, and we have to be somewhat respectful. This process isn't over yet. We're in the middle of
We
it.
got a bet on it.
And you know what, Jerry? That's probably a good place to start.
She could be in the arbitrator of the bet.
I was going to say, maybe I want in.
No, because I always lose. So
Okay.
you want in on his side, not my side.
So it's on the DZO. Will the DZO be officially greenlit and approved by City Council by 12/31/23? That's the over-under. I say not a chance in hell. From my tea leaves reading, Michael Payne is slowing this down. He realizes that Leah Puryear's term, the interim counselor, expires at the end of the year. Natalie Oshrin comes in. Natalie Oshrin's going to go full steam ahead with the DZO, approved in its full form, Natalie Oshrin. Puryear does not want that. I say there's not a chance in HE double hockey sticks that this gets approved before the 31st of December. Smith, on the other hand, we got a bottle of bourbon on this. If you want to get in on the action,
So what it's
says yes.
really going on, Valerie, the bourbon's getting a little light at the bar over there.
Yeah,
And-
I can tell that from here.
We close a lot of deals here. And when we close a deal, we hit the bar.
So I've actually got crystal balls, and I forgot to put it on up here to take a look at it. But what's your read on it? You think we're going to get this passed by the end of the year?
For the reasons you all just said, I think that's the big question in town. I feel very confident something will get approved. But
By the end of the year.
I do, not necessarily. At one time, I thought for sure, but the dynamics you just described, I think, are real. And it's such an important issue. There's such a lot of emotion and strong feelings on all sides of the issue. And it's complicated, and it's important. It's going to have an important impact on our city for a long time, whatever is approved. But I think there's a chance, but I also think there's a chance that we could be looking at more like April or May.
That's what I think.
So apparently I need to
but-
go to ABC store after the show.
I mean, she basically said you just lost the bet. That's what she just said right there.
I don't know. I don't obviously do not have any
Dog
more
in the fight.
insider. No more insider information than anyone else does, other than appearing at as many of the meetings as I can and watching all the video replays of those that I haven't, and trying to
We're going to find out if I really lost in about a week and a half when it comes back to the planning commission, right? Because it went through the public hearing portion of
Right.
it. Now it's going to come back for, I guess, discussion. It depends on how much they change it and
Right.
what they change, right?
Right.
If they just greenlit it the way it is, I might win. But my suspicion is there was enough questions that were popped up, and I'm going to want to get into some of them a little bit today.
Why don't we take an opportunity first for people to meet Valerie?
Oh, that's a good idea.
We know Valerie, the professional. How about Valerie, the background, the localized, personalized, and humanized version of Valerie?
Okay. Well, first, let me thank you guys for inviting me today. It's exciting to be here, and I'm honored to be here, and that you thought I was worthy. So thank you. And
stop it.
I've been looking forward to it.
You're awesome.
You are awesome.
Well, thank you. So I've been in Charlottesville, I think, what I say earlier. I came here in fall of '95 to start law school, and I started practicing here in the fall of '98. And as I was telling Keith earlier, I don't know if irony is the right word or humorous, I had zero interest in practicing real estate law. But I happened to find there was a job that was for a real estate lawyer. So I was fortunate to get that, and it was right in fall of '98. Things were really starting to take off, and so it's been an interesting ride ever since then. So I really love living here. My husband Don and I, we have 2 kids. Although they're not even kids anymore because now they're 18 and 21, both in college.
So you're an empty nester now?
Apparently so.
Good for you. Welcome to the club.
Yeah, thank you. It's a little bit hard to imagine, but the good news is I know they'll be back to visit starting in Thanksgiving and all of those things. So
where are they going to school?
My oldest son is at the University of Colorado in Boulder.
Nice.
And my younger son, Landon, is a freshman at Virginia Tech.
That's great.
So
congratulations.
Yeah. So
that's going to make for an interesting Thanksgiving dinner. Virginia Tech. That's going to be an interesting conversation.
Yeah. Well, Landon's been a Virginia Tech fan practically since birth, so it worked out well that he's able to be there. So
what's your number one hobby? What do you like to do for fun?
I like to run. Used to do a lot of trail running, trying to get back into that, but just running mostly for fitness, but I also enjoy it. My husband and I run together a lot, so that's fun, and just hanging out with family and friends. Enjoying the time with our kids before they left the nest, and just have a good group of friends in the neighborhood and enjoy those kind of things, and reading, travel. We do a lot of travel as a family, so that's probably higher on my list than anything. So
my wife initially struggled with this whole empty nester thing. Me, not so much, but I guess that's a typical kind of guy mom, dad mom kind of thing. But hang in there, it gets better.
Yeah, it's good. It helps knowing they're both so happy and they're where they want to be. And my son Davis, who's a senior at Colorado, is a huge football fan. And
you got Dion.
I mean, he is living his best life with Colorado football right now. So it's really, really fun to see him enjoy that. He was a freshman during the COVID year when there was zero football and zero everything else. And
zero fun.
So he's finally, exactly, getting to have fun. So it makes it a lot easier when they're happy at where they are and making friends and settling in. So that helps a lot.
You got the local newspaper watching the program, 2 TV stations watching the program right now. Neil Williamson says the first Planning Commission work session occurred on Tuesday. The discussion was very focused. I anticipate they will meet the proposed schedule, but City Council may slow walk this. Viewers and listeners, what do you think of the draft zoning ordinance, upzoning, rezoning, whatever you guys want to call it? I'd say arguably the hottest topic of conversation in Charlottesville in, 24 months? How long have we been dealing with this? Forever?
Oh, God. What has it been, like 7 years, right?
Yeah, if you count the comprehensive plan, sure.
About 7 years it's been in the thing.
Yeah.
So,
should we start open-ended?
Yeah, let's start open-ended.
Okay.
Where do you want to go? Draft zoning ordinance, upzoning, rezoning, anywhere you want to go.
What topic do you want to pick up on this?
I thought you were going to choose I would react.
No. You're the guest. You pick the top. Where do you want to kick it off? What do you like the most about it?
What I like the most is the opportunity that it provides in every area of the city. I think it's really a bold plan, and the basics of it I support completely in the sense that it's going to provide more opportunity for more housing most everywhere in the city, and hopefully less regulatory provisions, less discretionary approvals. Hopefully people won't need our help as much as that, and that's what gives me a lot of hope for the future going forward. I mean, eliminating the residential density limits is a huge factor.
53% of the city of Charlottesville zone R1, single-family detached. A lot of people say that constrains supply, which is driving price points through the roof. A lot of people say if you lessen zoning or you make it more flexible, more supply will be birthed, which could birth or breed housing affordability. I'm not one of those people, but you're the pro. I will respond to what you have to say.
Well, in the single-family zoning now, I think it's going to be hard to say. And just like the pace of change report, had some good predictions that it's going to be relatively slow, I think. But there's a lot of there's so many ifs, as was noted in that report. I know more, obviously, with the way the zoning is now in the R1 districts. I'm not sure I've ever worked on a project in an R1 district or had any reason to.
You do mostly multifamily projects.
Multifamily on the residential side, sure. And so I'm more excited just because it's my world with the mixed-use districts. And, right now we spend a lot of our time on rezonings and special use permits for additional building height and or additional density for projects that really could have gone through an administrative process. So I think the goals of this draft, by allowing that to happen and the form-based goals to ensure the design are appropriate and so forth, that makes much more sense for everyone. That'll hopefully allow projects to go forward faster. And to get those, especially some of the big projects that have a lot of units in them, could have a really impactful, beneficial impact relatively quickly. If this goes
Phase 3
first.
Dairy Market. Phase 3 Dairy Market. John Blair giving Valerie some props right now. He says, tell Valerie I said hello. She is awesome. He's watching in Stanton right now. Keith Smith.
Well,
Yeah.
that's a high compliment from John, so thanks, John.
So that's interesting. I didn't expect to take the opposite position
Okay.
of view on this. I believe we're in the right step. I believe that this is going to happen, some version of
For sure.
this. It's either the end of the year and I win the bet, or lose the bet and I have to drink the bourbon anyway, so I win no matter what.
a win-win.
I don't really. I'm involved in Seattle and Portland. I was involved a little bit in the Arlington rezoning. It's really not making the impact in those areas that it was predicted to do. And reading through this 400 pages with all these particular tabs, and I'll try to generalize it a little bit, particularly in the multifamily world, and particularly with and I'm an affordable housing geek. I
Right.
chair a bunch of affordable
Yep.
housing things. I don't think this will do zero for affordable housing, the way it's written at the moment, because if you're over 9, which you will be in a multifamily, you've got to provide for 60% AMI, and I just don't think the math's going to work unless there's substantial. This is a good first step, but then unless there's substantial subsidies, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But so I just don't. I think it's going to have a larger impact on the RAs and the RCs and so forth and so on that than I think in your world. I may be wrong, and I'd love you to push back a little bit.
Obviously, there's a lot of more discussion to be had in terms of the affordable housing for the inclusionary zoning sections of the ordinance. It's obviously important, and we've talked about this a lot, Keith, in the context of the county's affordable housing program,
sure.
and the importance of the affordable housing provisions and requirements have to be viable. They have to work, or the developers won't be able to build the projects. I mean, it's just, they won't get the financing for it. And so it's really, I think the challenge is finding the balance between ensuring that it's appropriate, there is enough affordable housing and at the right affordability levels, but not so to actually produce those units, but not too aggressive that it means you get no projects. And that's the multi-million-dollar question right there, is where is that balance? And my hope is that the city will continue to engage with all the stakeholders on that issue to ensure that we find it, or at least get as close as we possibly can. Maybe it gets tweaked, in 6 months or a year if it's not working right, but I think that's the importance. What is I always like to reiterate and share is that our clients, they all want to do their part.
Sure.
They all talk about that. They want to be able to provide units on site if they can make it work. And they all run the numbers, and it's just a matter of being realistic and hoping that we get there and find where that balance is so it can actually happen. But I think if it were, you could have projects that bring forward 50, 60 units, affordable units, all at one time. That would have a tremendous impact on the city.
It would. I just don't, because I've been doing a bunch of ROIs on different properties, and we'll talk a little bit. I'm more focused on the single family.
Okay.
Because I'm more of an ownership
Sure.
side of the equation than rental side of the equation. It's just my business.
Sure.
Right? Your business is more multifamily, but we'll talk about that in a little while. But the delta between what it costs, right, and what you have to rent them for is so wide. I just don't know if the math's ever going to work.
Yeah, it's hard. And then, of course, if then the market rate rents have to go up more, and then the cycle just
Sure.
continues and gets worse. So it is a challenge. Again, that's why I hope that everybody can continue the dialogue and try to figure out how to make it work so everybody's goals are achieved. That we get more market rate units, and we get a lot more affordable units, and we get good projects out of it.
And
So-
Mayor Lloyd Snook sat in this chair, and we had the same kind of conversation. And
I think he's cooling on this. Mayor Snook.
I mean, that may be the case, but what he talked about here was you mentioned ratcheting it, right? And there was a lot of discussion at the Planning Commission about this as a living document, right? And I get that. But we might want to talk a little bit about what's required, because once this gets approved, whatever version it is, there's a thing called a ZTA, right, a zoning text amendment. We might want to talk for those who are not as geeky as maybe you and I on this, or Jerry, what that really means and what that process really looks like. Because if we approve this and let's say the mayor wants to tweak it a little bit, or the council wants to tweak it a little bit, what does that process look like?
Before she answers, she's going to like to hear this. Carlos Franco says Valerie is the smartest real estate attorney I know.
Wow.
It's putting
Well,
down
thank
feet.
you, Carlos.
And there's a dozen comments like this for Valerie, giving her some props right now. So she's well liked. Valerie, the show is
Thank you,
yours.
Jerry. Sorry, I've already forgotten what the question was.
So-
That zoning test, what is that process if they update it in the future? It would be just a shorter, hopefully shorter, smaller version of what we're doing now. Zoning text amendment, you change one word in the zoning ordinance, that's changing the text of the ordinance. So it's a zoning text amendment, ZTA, and so that has to go through the same process. It has to be submitted, it has to be reviewed by the Planning Commission.
The public gets a chance to
Public
comment?
gets a chance to weigh in. Has to be a public hearing, could be a joint public hearing which is how they typically do their hearings in the city, Planning Commission with counselors in the room, or it could be two separate public hearings like they envisioned for this ordinance. But it could also be fairly quick. The city has, in the past, done some kind of standalone zoning text amendments here or there when they discovered that they, had reason to do so. It doesn't have to be a year-long process. It could be a 2-month process. So,
Correct. Realistically, it's about 90 days. I think the quickest you can get it by the
Probably.
time that they decide to do this, run through staff, go through the Planning Commission, then end up back into it. But it's
that's
important.
probably reasonable.
It's important to point out that if the word living document and tweak is used, there is a public process
Absolutely.
in this. So, once it gets approved, to go ahead and amend it is a public process. It has to follow a very formal process to change it. Just somebody in the city can't just decide to change this.
Correct.
And I think that's important to get out, because some folks may think, they'll be able to switch it a little bit behind closed doors, and I don't think.
No. Sorry, that's good. I didn't realize that was the thought.
Well,
so,
yeah,
no, you're exactly right. It's the same process to review and approve a rezoning or a special use permit. Exactly the same process.
So they will have, if somebody wants to, like if an applicant wants to do a ZTA, then they have to hire you to go through the whole process.
Well, they don't necessarily have to hire me, but they have to go and ask Planning Commission or staff or council to initiate
Let's try to throw you
the
some
ZTA. So
I
thank
think
you.
she's got plenty of business. I think she's got
So,
business for days over here.
Yeah.
There you go.
So-
I'll throw this to you here. I'll play devil's advocate for the sake of a talk show. I've also been pretty adamant with my stance on this upzoning on this network for a couple years here. Upzoning makes land more opportunistic. Opportunistic land leads to more speculation. More speculation leads to higher price tags. Higher price tags on said land means deals closed at higher price points. Higher price points for purchasing of opportunistic land means investors want more return on their money. This is all coinciding when the cost of goods, COGS, the labor market, and the financing market are arguably the most expensive they've ever been in American history.
Plus construction costs.
Plus construction costs, part of the COGS right there. I don't think upzoning is going to create any kind of affordability whatsoever. And I've been very adamant about this on this talk show many times, that I think the land that's going to be upzoned and the land that's actually going to be developed is land that's going to be adjacent or very near neighborhoods that are on the financial margin, that historically or generationally have been either forgotten or afterthoughts. A perfect example of this is the Twice as Nice thrift store, the Preston Suds parking lot, the Preston Suds laundromat, and the parking lots next to them. Very close to Fifeville, a community that is historically African American. Phase 3 of Dairy Market, Chris Henry and Stony Point, 400 apartments leading to housing for 600 people, 1.5 people per apartment. He got what I would characterize the response as, how would I characterize this response? Volatile. The response was intense. Yeah. The community response was heated. The reality is he can do this once upzoning is approved according to the letter of the law and doesn't really even need community feedback. What Chris was trying to do, then I'll get out of your way, what Chris was trying to do was, I want to be a good steward here and hear what the community has to say and do phase 3 based on what the community wants. The reality is, once this DZO is greenlit, whenever it happens or approved, he doesn't have to do that. So I'm kind of just, I'm the host, try to keep the discussion going here.
I mean, the process you described is, I think, the inherent challenge, and the Planning Commission spent a lot of time talking about this on Tuesday night, this exact issue, and the challenges of wanting to provide opportunities to create wealth for families in all neighborhoods, but particularly neighborhoods that have been racially discriminated against by the city. Marginalized, probably, of course, especially in those communities, because we all know, Keith probably says it better than me, but owning a home is the best and fastest way to accumulate wealth for individuals and families. And that's an important goal and opportunity for all of our city residents to have the benefit of. At the same time, that comes with the types of challenges you've just described. It is a tough issue, and that's, probably sums up the big challenge with this process exactly. I certainly don't have any magic bullets there, but I think it's important I think the process is going to play out well. The Planning Commission certainly seems very focused on trying to figure out a way to find some balance in those situations, but also, respond to the feedback that they've received from the 10th and Page neighborhood and others about their concerns. That's the tough part of zoning and land development regulation in every community.
And she's right, 10th and Page. I called it FIFO. She's exactly right. 10th and Page. I misspoke there. Thank you for that.
So back on that, and this is a perfect segue into what I've been looking at. I've been looking at for the land trust, a piece of property just happens to be also owned by Chris Henry and the Paul Manning Group over there in Dairy Market LLC on the corner of 10th and West. But before I do that, I'm a firm believer in plagiarism. So there's a dear friend of ours,
Glad you admitted
Robert. I admit it publicly. I believe in it.
Robert Liberty, Silver Bullets, Silver Buckshots.
That's exactly right. We spend way too much time together, him and I. He finishes he finishes my thoughts. But there is no silver bullet to this. To quote the great Robert Liberty out in Portland State University and the University of Washington, there's a silver buckshot, right? So there's no one solution. So if Judah wouldn't mind, I want to take a little bit of dive into this, right?
Sure.
On it, because we brought up that neighborhood. So
you're talking 10th and Page.
10th and Page, if Judah wouldn't mind putting this up. So what I have done is I've done an ROI and a pro forma on this. And I took a look at that under the current proposed zoning. What could I build, right, as the land trust? I also looked at it, what can I build from site conditions, right? So I brought in an engineer, civil engineer, ship engineering to take a look at that. What could we build, what we can't build? So what we can build under this, by ordinance, we can build 6, but physically we only can fit 5.
And what's the proposed zoning on this parcel?
So that'll be
parcels?
an RA.
Okay.
The RA, so that'll be a maximum of 3.
Right. So it looks like it's 4.
It's 6. It's 5.
5 parcels. Got it.
5 parcels. The current zoning is 1 SFD, right? 1 single family detached. If this gets approved the way it's written, we could put 6, but we physically can't fit 6 on there. So that's another consideration. We'll do 5. And what we're doing, and I sent Judah a link, but the Land Trust built homes on Nassau Street. Right. They were 1,500 square feet, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, has solar on them. They're true net zero homes. Wow. And I also know, as the chair of the Land Trust, in order for me to sell one of them to a 60% AMI right now, the maximum amount of money that buyer could pay is $200,000. It's really closer to $175,000. Wow. But I'm a Marine and I got to keep it simple. So I call it $200,000. Wow. So I took those and I reran it through all the contractors to the current pricing. It costs it'll cost $350,000 to produce them. We have to sell them, so we're short $750,000, which means we need to now go get a grant to go ahead and do that. And oh, by the way, I've got to borrow $1.7 million to build them, to go ahead and through that. And so the reality of it is, I don't think I can get that to work. And the reality of that is, it's probably going to be 3 homes that are probably going to be in the high 4s, low 5s on that. And we may not get this because they're working on this, which is great, but nobody's talking about the money. And if that 750 doesn't get found, and that's grant money, that's free money, we can't charge that back to anybody. We can't pay interest on it. We need to have grant money of $750,000 to produce 5 permanently affordable homes. And I want this to work in the worst way.
That's not going to work.
But unless I can find somebody to donate $750,000,
Right.
I just don't know if I can make this work.
And does
And
that
that's my
include
struggle.
land costs, by the way?
Yeah, the 350 is all in. That's
Okay.
acquisition, development, vertical construction, horizontal construction. All the contractors are doing it at cost. Right, but
Right.
I want it to work. I just don't know if it will.
Yeah. No, I mean, this is a great example of the challenges and the realities of trying to make this work. Like I was describing earlier, is it has to work or it can't happen. And
We're a nonprofit.
It's kind of gut wrenching for you to walk through this and to hear the realities of what you're talking about. It's
That's why I think this is all window dressing. I think upzoning is all window dressing.
I don't think it's window
Well-
dressing. I think they believe that everybody wants this to work.
Yeah.
I just don't
But
think
they're not businessmen
But-
and businesswomen.
But this is an example, for example, and I know obviously you wanted to do 5 affordable units, but if you weren't a nonprofit developer, what if you had 1 affordable unit and the other 4 were market rate? Could you meet the affordable limits there?
Well, that's a different story.
Right. But I think that's.
Well, there is no affordable limits because according to
Right, but if you wanted to.
Yeah.
correct.
If you
correct.
wanted to do that.
You could.
And that's where, as best I can predict, maybe we'll see some progress on the margins. Now, it's definitely not the silver bullet.
Well,
but will that 1 affordable unit here is more than there are now, and then you've got 4 market rate units. Those are 4 new families that have 5 new families that have a place to live.
And what she's
in
talking about
Charlottesville.
is don't let perfection be the enemy of productivity.
Yeah.
That's what she's talking
And
about.
so-
And we saw that with previous council regimes. And
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that.
So you get one affordable unit here. You wish you had more, but hopefully you have more of this going on all around the city, and at the same time you have more multifamily projects coming online with big slugs of affordable units, and you make progress in different places and different ways through different housing products all around the city.
Thank you for coming
That's
on.
what I hope and think will happen. I think that's generally the goal of this is.
But will it happen? That's the question.
I mean,
Neil Williamson calls it an evolution and not a revolution.
I would agree with that.
that's probably a great way to phrase it. Yeah, but
Now,
it's,
from the land trust perspective, we probably couldn't do that, right? But if a private developer,
Private developer's not going to do that.
well, they may or may not. It depends on their ROI, and I have not looked at it.
they could make it work. I know plenty of private developers who would do this if they can make it work. They still have to make a profit on the 4 other units, but if they can make it work, I know plenty that would try
Well,
to
that's
do
what we
so.
did with Stanley Martin Homes, one
Right.
of our great sponsors.
Right.
We did 23 of them. They literally did exactly that same
Sure.
thing. So what that would look like is, from a land trust perspective, that 5th home, single-family detached home over there, they would just deed over that land and stuff to us,
Yeah,
and then
and
we
let you
return
all-
it, let
yeah.
us go ahead and sell it. So that would be forever
Right.
affordable.
And there's a lot of community benefit in that regard
Let me
too.
take some notes.
Okay.
How about this question that's come in? This is from Grayson, who's watching in North Downtown. Jerry, bring up your topic that you've highlighted on the I Love Seville show about upzoning not only impacting the marginalized neighborhoods, but the easiest path to development. Please ask the attorney this topic. So this is what I've said on previous shows. The easiest path to going vertical for a developer is to get, is the word contiguous? Lots that are
Like
next to each other?
an assemblage?
An assemblage. So what I've done in this building, it's an HOA building, is assembled units, which allows me to control the association. That's what's happened here.
Okay.
Okay? That happened over a 8 or 9 period of time because I actually read the bylaws, and no one reads the bylaws.
It's so true.
Okay? So I saw the percentage that was needed
Well, it covers the restrictions.
and just
Right.
sprinted to that number. So the assemblage is paramount for development. The assemblage, the easiest path to accumulate or aggregate is tied to affordable price point. And the affordable price points in the city of Charlottesville right now are not North Downtown, they're not Belmont, they're not Park Street, not Johnson Village. They're probably 10th and Page.
And I would argue those are not even affordable.
They're probably some of the off streets on Cherry, and they're probably Prospect. So I've made the statement and I thought a very convincing argument, that those 3 localities, those 3 neighborhoods, that's a better phrase, are going to see the assemblage happen, which will create development and neighborhood characteristic change. Topic for a conversation. That's what Grayson wants me to bring up with you.
Well, again, I'm no expert on the, residential real estate, single-family homes and so forth, but, and you may be right, Jerry, I don't know. But I think about the size, so I lived in the Greenbrier neighborhood for 14 years. And
That's where the mayor lives.
We actually had our lot was 1.25 acres.
Wow, that's big
And
time.
it could easily hold, it could have it could have easily held 2 more houses, if not 3 or 4. There's a lot of lots, not many that are that big in Greenbrier, but there's a lot of very large lots with houses sitting very far back from the road, as ours did. You could easily put another house in the front yard, turned to the side. I think every neighborhood in this city is desirable. I think there'll be interest in adding units in every neighborhood, and sure, will the lots or the land be a
Cost
little higher?
prohibitive.
I don't know. That's not my area of expertise.
Okay.
But my hope is that there's going to be there'll be opportunity in neighborhoods like Greenbrier and Venable and other neighborhoods where there is not any opportunity now for more families to move in. And I think maybe they're not affordable units. Maybe those are part of market rate units, but it frees up more, those 3 or 4 families or however now have a place to live. And they can live in the Greenbrier neighborhood, and like every school in the city, you've got great public schools, and it's convenient. It was really a great, convenient location when we lived there.
Greenbrier's great.
But there's a lot of, and I know part of the challenge is some of these neighborhoods, unfortunately, do have restrictive covenants that don't allow that. But hopefully there's other neighborhoods that currently do not allow any subdivision or sublots that now will be able to do that. And, if I still lived in Greenbrier, I would try to do this. I'd have to figure out how to get the financing for it and find somebody who could,
I'm sure you could find the money.
But anyway, my hope is that the scenario you predict won't be that harsh. Certainly, price drives a lot.
So I'm the
but-
recovering developer at the table.
Okay.
I like to think I'm in my 8th step, which is making amends, but I'm probably really in my 1st step, which means I haven't recognized I have a problem.
Which means he still wants to do it. And he's got ideas over there
Oh my
left
God!
and right.
If I was 20 years
There it
younger
is.
and didn't lose $17 million, I was walking a client through a new construction. We were doing a home inspection in the middle of it, right during the framing stages. I built like 600 houses and all this kind of great stuff. And I was walking through there smelling the sawdust, and I was like, oh, damn, I missed this.
Oh.
And then Yona goes, no, you don't. My wife goes, no,
The
you
very
don't.
small margins and the very high
Oh,
risk.
God, and that's a whole thing. Everybody
Right.
thinks developers
Oh.
make money. but-
Carrying debt service, the
There it is.
unpredictable market, 2024 being more expensive, the labor shortage, the cost of goods, the financing.
But to Jerry's specific question, you work for developers. I'm a recovering one. What is the hardest thing for a developer to do? Not all this. What is the one
That's such a loaded question right
hardest
there.
thing?
Get their financing?
No, assemblage.
Oh, sure.
That-
Well, what I was going to say is take a discretionary application through the city or county zoning process.
No, the second thing is getting your freaking bonds back. We're on year number 4
That's bananas.
with Nassau Street, nonprofit. We're on year number 4, and I can't get back.
That's why I think the assemblage is going to happen in the neighborhoods that I outlined.
I will look you in the face. I've done enough of this in my life.
There's one investor in the 10th and Page neighborhood that owns a couple hundred homes alone.
Yeah, I know exactly who it is.
Yeah.
But going ahead and putting an assemblage together, Spudnuts property is a prime example. It's in the right location.
Yeah.
It's at the bottom of the new bridge.
Right.
It is, if it's approved, it's done, but there's a donut hole in the middle of somebody else who owns it who will not sell.
Wow.
Well, and the leases. I mean, there's
Yeah,
a little
yeah,
bit.
yeah,
There's a huge red flag with how the lease renewals are
But
tied.
but that lease is got 4 years of life left in it. This will take 4 years to 6 years, right, to get approved. So once this gets done, to run it through the system, it's going to take years, and that will probably time out if somebody really wants to do that. You think it's going to take less time?
To adopt the ordinance?
No,
or
I'm
to,
talking it is adopted, and I bring a project before.
Oh, to get a project through.
Yeah.
So site plan review.
Site plan
I mean, that-
review, get it done. It's at least 2, I think, closer to 4 years. It is. I don't think they have the human resources.
I mean,
to
that
do
is a
this.
very big challenge that we're already dealing with. We being the development community, whether you're a small custom builder or a large developer, it is extraordinarily challenging to get site plans and subdivision plots approved, city and county. It is a huge challenge.
Which one's more difficult?
They're both challenging, and it's just
Well done.
it's volume and it's staffing
the
and
city
resources.
is much harder than
Is that true?
I think the city's, but unless it
It's-
changes. And I don't mean,
it's
I'm not
tough.
throwing any shade.
Yeah.
They're hardworking folks over there. It's just, it is hard. When you,
I mean, the Woodards walked away from $1 million plus on Water Street.
yeah.
Underground infrastructure and said, "Peace, I'm out. I don't want to deal with this anymore."
When a little nonprofit, who, by the way, the city gave $240,000 to do this, can't get back $20,000 that it's been done. And oh, by the way, 2 of the homes have already retraded, and we still don't have our $20,000.
I mean, that's not how the bond process is supposed to work.
That's
Right.
exactly
There are
right.
provisions in state code about when and how bonds are supposed to be released and at what stage, and that is a challenge for every developer.
What
and
happens is then they ask for more information.
I know.
Then you have to hire engineers and you have to hire lawyers.
update your estimates and it's
and our decision is to keep it, right?
Wow.
It's just too expensive and too much brain damage to move on. I want to pivot a little bit.
Covenants and restrictions, please.
That's not where I was going to go, but let me go there first, and then we'll
Want me to set the stage?
we'll tackle that. No, I wanted to talk about inventory, but we'll do that.
yes, let's.
You want to talk about
Yes.
inventory?
Okay.
So, a little bit of real talk with Keith Smith on the I Love Charlottesville Network News. Dr. Lisa Sturvant, who's the chief economist,
I've heard her speak before.
she is going to start coming on a once a month on the show to talk about the
Wonderful.
market overall. Yeah, we're really super excited.
Commonwealth-wide.
Yes.
Well, she's going to do national Commonwealth, and she also has access to our local
Ooh.
data. So we're going to dive into some local
That'll be
stuff.
very valuable.
But I had a conversation with her yesterday, and she gave me permission to use this. Her estimate, and she's a very much so straight shooter, is that inventory has to double before we start seeing any type of price stabilization or reduction. So we literally have to double what we've been selling just to kind of keep up. So
Well, the inventory's so low now, doubling it is not all that big of a hurdle
Right.
at this point. But the point is, of course,
So Yona
it's
bought
got-
me
it's
these
gotta
socks that I'm not
increase-
wearing called Captain Obvious. I should have probably.
Well, and let's add this to the mix. And I say this all the time. Blue in the face. Paul Manning Biotech School, $100 million donation by Paul Manning. UVA said this is going to create 2,000 to 3,000 incremental citizens moving to Charlottesville and Albemarle County. The majority of them with 6-figure jobs. Friend of the program, Jaffrey Woodruff, $180 million donation for the data science school. 2,000 to 3,000 incremental citizens moving to the area with 6-figure jobs. Louisa, $11 billion investment by Amazon. Talked to a supervisor off the record. can't name his or her name. He indicated 1,000 new people moving to the area,
Yeah.
tied to $11 billion from Amazon, UVA expanding enrollment, and UVA hiring more people to service said expanded enrollment. We're talking 8 to 10,000 incremental citizens. On top of that, Bloomberg just named Charlottesville number 15 in the nation. You saw that.
I did.
15 in the nation, work from home. 21% of the population currently doing it, which means it's an opportunity here to take a big city paycheck but live in Charlottesville.
Right.
So that's why this 10th and Page property will end up with 3 homes in the 5 to 6 range.
And I think that's light. 5 to 6.
And
I
somebody,
think it's 7,
I tell
8.
you, if I was 20 years younger,
You would take it and you'd build 2,500 square feet,
if
brand
all-
new,
well, no,
3,000 square feet?
No, actually, I'd probably keep them between 15 and 18. I don't think you need anything that big over there. The bottom line is, that's where the profit center is. Now, if I was solely, that's where I was focusing on, I didn't spend so much time, it's like you and I. One hand, I make,
Right.
this is how I pay my bills, and the other hand, this is my dedication of my volunteer time on it, because I passionately believe that we have to do
Absolutely.
this. But looking at it objectively, that's the path forward. And I can
That's
net
the path to profitability that's easy. That's what you're saying.
I would net $100,000 a unit all day long.
Wow.
I ran the numbers.
Yeah.
And
Well, again, those are houses, at least families have. Some of those new residents, future residents, will have homes to live in instead of living in Fluvanna or Greene or Waynesboro and commuting in and clogging the streets even more. But it is a challenge. The inventory issue is a challenge. Some of it is tied to the pace of approval of site plans and subdivision plats. My hope and understanding is that when the ordinance is approved, the city will make some pretty significant investments in staffing and process. I know they've got new computer software coming online soon that I'm optimistic will help. But they're going to need more bodies down in City Hall to help
I don't know how they're going
this.
to implement this.
And,
I think this.
Is the computer software that's coming online coming to police the short-term rentals or the Airbnbs?
My understanding is they have software that's coming, I think I heard November, that will be similar to the county's County View process, where it's like an application tracking software program where you can get online and check the status of your site plan review or
my bond.
your special use permit. Hope maybe that would be a great addition to it, so people can understand, whether it's just, interested citizens can look and see what's been submitted in my neighborhood, or if you're following a project, where is it? Has the site plan been approved, or when is this rezoning going to planning commission public hearing? All of those kind of things. I think that would help a lot. It would ideally reduce the number of phone calls that people have to make to the staff now, or emails to staff. Hey, where are my comments
So
to my
I-
site plan application?
So I can tell you in Portland and Seattle what they have done. They've actually increased the application fee, but if you're in affordable housing, you check all the boxes in their ordinance, they get a specific assigned staff member
Right.
that takes it from point A to point B. You got to pay a little bit extra for that. But to talk about why this bonding is so important, and nobody's talking about it, Christopher Bremett from Bramante Homes,
He's
right?
I know Christopher well. He's the best.
Great dude.
Shout
love him
out to
to death.
Christopher and Vermonte Homes.
So shout out to him. But I helped him do his project on Shamrock.
Okay.
He just got it
Oh, yeah.
released after 3 years of fighting it. And he texts me to go, Smith, you want to come over for a sip of champagne, right? Because it was a big
It
thing.
was that big of a deal.
It was a big
Yeah.
deal. And this wasn't 20 families. This was multiple tens of thousands of dollars.
And how many units roughly?
Oh, I could you
Like
would ask that.
25?
20, yeah. I
Yeah,
can't
something like
remember
that.
how many it was. It was all by right? It was all ready to do it. It's student housing.
Right.
But, just to talk about how important it was that money was cash out of his small little company that
Yep.
he owns, that he couldn't use, that just sat there for years.
Right.
No interest on, by the way. I think there is any, but anyway, if there is, it's not enough to go ahead and do it. So this is an important part of
Absolutely.
the process. on
Absolutely.
that
I mean,
end of
and
it.
the bigger projects obviously have,
Bigger numbers.
much bigger numbers that, mean that they can't take that money, whether it's Christopher or somebody else, can't take that money and invest it in the next project that could create homes for more families.
I think
So-
Jerry's got something.
I do. I have a lot of stuff. I'll get to one of the viewers and listeners before my stuff first. This is from Vanessa Parkhill, who's watching in Earlysville. She says, what happens to the threshold for entry in this model? While a couple people get affordable units, the entry-level price point for those who do not qualify is now higher. Those type of folks are your single teachers, your nurses, your firemen, your police officers. We call them frontline workers. Charlottesville Police Department is a proud partner of our 12:30 show, the I Love CVille show, and one of the officers, I'm not going to utilize his name, higher up in the department, indicated that a very small percentage of the police force is able to afford to live in the city they serve. And one of the challenges the police department has with filling their many vacancies, at one time it was a third of the department was vacant, was you could go to Almaro or Louisa and Orange and not have to commute and pay basically the same wage for the city and live in the community that you're serving. So that's something for both you guys, if we could highlight the future for teachers, nurses, firemen, police officers in this city, because they're higher than the AMI requirements, but not by much.
I was going to say, as our AMI keeps increasing.
Well, HUD said our household income for this area is $123,300.
Yep, I think it was a 19% increase over last year, and the year before that it was a roughly similar increase. I mean,
so I
think those frontline workers are going to qualify for affordable housing, certainly
eventually.
at the 80% AMI. I mean, and that's where you start realizing, not that we don't all know that we have a serious problem, but
crisis.
Yeah, that
I can add context to that
Sure.
conversation. All of the 23 units that we built in, we meaning the Land Trust in Albemarle County, townhome units, the average AMI was 65%, and every single one of them was teachers, cops, firemen, nurses, that moved into into those 23.
Yeah.
Under those 23. So to your point, that was not at 123, by the way, because we closed them last year. So that was at that 19% lower
right.
number.
111 something.
But also the interest rate was a little lower.
Right. Which obviously makes a huge difference. I mean, I'll just say, it's as challenging for the Albemarle County police officers as it is for the city. The prices in the county, the Albemarle County Police Foundation has a very robust program of subsidizing or providing grants to officers both for purchasing homes and for rental.
The problem
so
is
that
it's not
those
enough.
officers can live in the county where they serve. Exactly. If it weren't for substantial donations from local foundations and very generous folks to the Police Foundation, they wouldn't be able to do that. It's such a challenge for all of our frontline workers.
So I'm reading a text from Scott Carpenter, who is an assistant chief at the Charlottesville Fire Department. And I asked him the question this morning, how many of his people travel from outside the area? And he has people traveling from from, what's the county south of Lovington, help me out,
Amherst?
Joe. Amherst. Traveling from Amherst
believe it.
to work here for a $50,000 a year job, by the way.
Yeah.
And because they can't find it. He says most of his new firemen that are working underneath him are traveling an hour and a half. Now, I'm the son of a New York City fireman, grandson, great-grandson of New York City firemen. So they don't make a lot of money. That's just, they do it for the passion.
Right.
The passion of it. But, to go ahead and travel an hour and a half for the people that serve us the most is just wrong.
I agree completely. And I think most everyone would agree with that sentiment, whether it's a firefighter, a police officer, a teacher, a nurse, a tech, in a hospital or a nursing home facility. I love the term frontline worker. It's such a collective term and also emphasizes the importance of them. That we all need. And, in addition to the new jobs that are coming that you mentioned, Jerry, for all those reasons, I'm not certain about this, but someone told me that the university hospital system is about to hire 200 new physicians. So, of course, those are 200 new physicians and potentially their families, but also you have to have nurses and techs to support them and their practices.
The other little bit of news on that is they're slowly phasing out the contract nurses, and they're hiring on actual nurses because they, as you know, they have some new
huge
leadership
nursing
there.
shortage too.
Yeah, they have some new leadership over there, and that's what they're transferring out, these will be permanent residents.
Meaning they need homes.
They need homes.
Yeah.
But the basic model of the land trust is the frontline workers.
Right.
That's what we're focusing on, because the ones that are below that, there's different programs for.
Right.
And we want them to get into this ownership model. An example on the Nassau Street, that we sold our first one last year, resold our first one last year. It was a teacher, resold it, came into it with zero money, resold it, put $50,000 in their pocket, and they went up the ladder.
Right.
Then the person behind them is getting that benefit. And
because of the land trust model, it stays affordable, which is wonderful.
We haven't talked about the dichotomy or the crossroads of Albemarle County capping the development area to 5%. And in the last Board of Supervisors meeting, it was very clear the political capital is not there to expand the 5% developmental area. So the county that's adjacent to Charlottesville is basically saying, we're not going to allow any more development. It's going to be the urban ring. And Diantha McKeel, Ann Malik, they've come on this program. Ned Galloway, they've come on this program. They've said until the urban ring is at capacity, why would we expand? So the county that surrounds Charlottesville is saying this. At the same time, Charlottesville's trying to figure out a way to add more density. It seems that those two create loggerheads or create a point of friction. That's going to also diminish affordability of housing in any capacity. Anywhere you want to go on that topic?
Well, certainly the very, very small development area in the county is always a challenge, in my opinion. But to the county board's credit, they have also been talking a lot about because they don't want to expand the growth area, they've been talking a lot about the importance of approving projects at higher density levels, at least at or near the limits of the comprehensive plan designations, and being more dense, allowing higher heights, and that is the reality that they have to, the process they need to follow if they want to avoid having to expand the growth area. So thus far, the board has been very supportive of applications that have come before them. By the time it gets to them, it's been through the gauntlet.
Yeah.
But they have been receptive to them in a way that I haven't seen in my practice. So I'm optimistic that despite that, that they're going to do their part as well.
What are your thoughts on converting commercial to residential?
Oh,
those shopping centers on Route 49. I saw it, Keith. And I wasn't
literally,
I could feel it.
I think it's an incredibly obvious opportunity and solution to do that. It's challenging, it's expensive, but I think
what's challenging and expensive?
To renovate or
take a shopping center and make it residential.
Sure.
Yeah.
To convert office, I'm told it's challenging and expensive, and to convert office to residential. If I'm wrong, I hope I'm wrong.
Look, I mean, everything is expensive,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
But the reason it works, and this literally came out of, and Megan filled in for you, but this came out of the Regional Housing Partnership Square Table, where I was moderating the developer incentive program, and it came out of Stanley Martin Homes was in the room, and Megan started having this discussion about what does it look like to do that, and where the benefit is from the developer's perspective on it. I've got infrastructure there already.
Mm-hmm. Parking.
I've got parking. I've got roads. I think the conversion is probably not going to happen. So this is what's happened in Scott's Addition in Richmond. They've just demolished industrial buildings or commercial buildings and just went up because Richmond did exactly that. It changed, in this case, it was industrial zoning to allow mixed use.
Loft apartments and things like that, right? Yeah.
So do you think that's going to happen? You think that's a low-hanging fruit and they might make that change?
I think it is. I haven't heard any reasons not to. I haven't heard the counter argument. So there probably is a downside to doing that. I'm not aware of one.
I think the counter argument is infrastructure constraints.
Well, actually, and one just came to mind. I mean, I know the county is always hesitant to see commercial land be used for things that aren't commercial. They want to make sure, from an economic development perspective in particular, that there are plenty of places for existing businesses to expand and stay in the county, or new businesses to start up and grow, and that we don't convert everything to housing.
Well, and the schools are at capacity, and if you add more housing, you're straining already schools at full capacity.
Well, but again, that's the situation and challenge
Nationwide.
For every single community nationwide, exactly. That do you want to accommodate residents, current and future, in your city or your county, or
Future
do you,
residents don't vote, though.
Well, but we still got to take they're coming, right?
They're coming.
Just
So-
like
They don't
they're
vote
coming.
them into office.
So, but I tell you, back to the thing, back to the planning commission. Jerry and I talked about it the other day. I was super encouraged by the young people that showed up,
Oh,
the students.
absolutely.
That was, you don't see.
I never saw that when I was there 2000 to 2004, and the only thing I cared about was
Yep.
closing down Coupe de Villes
Yep.
and $1 burgers.
Yep.
UVA students
And
going
some
to
other
plan-
things we won't talk
Yeah.
about.
Right.
Well, I mean, I have talked about it. I don't really care. My wife doesn't like when I talk about it. Long story short, I would never have thought to get civically engaged. And I think
Right.
what's happening is the ubiquitous and approachable nature of social media and technology is creating a more engaged student, which I think is fantastic.
You're probably right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that and perhaps the very high rent prices they have to pay, or their families have to pay, to live in quality housing that's relatively close to grounds. It's a challenge. It hurts everybody.
My
So-
son-in-law is a medical grad from UVA, and my daughter and him lived in very close to UVA, and this was 5 years ago. There was $1,000 a door, and I'll tell you what, I wouldn't walk in the house.
Yeah.
I mean, it was that horrible.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that it wasn't shut down. But
$1,500 a door on West Main in those
Yeah.
towers for UVA students.
so
I paid $400.
I've said this before on the show. I think the
4X.
big struggle coming down the pike, if we look at 5 or 10 years down the road, is more generational, right?
I heard you say that on the episode, I think it was last week, with the realtors from Greene County.
Oh God, you watch.
I listened.
Thank you. Thank
I
you.
listened.
But it's generational, right? And it's numbers,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I'm a boomer. I'm dying off. My cohort of 60 million people are dying off. The Z and the millennial is 170 million. They're coming in droves, and there's two things are going to happen. And I got encouraged with that on looking at that. They're going to start showing up because they're
Absolutely.
pissed.
Absolutely.
My daughter, when we lost, we lost
13.
13 houses. The one that we won in Richmond, we were the 20th. And she grew up around this, and she's getting into business, which I'm excited about. And she looked at me and she goes, I hate you boomers.
yeah. The
I
ones
don't
who
know if that was me personal.
No,
I don't know.
They're
I think
bringing bags of money to real estate.
Well, that's what's
I hear-
happening.
right, they're
Yeah.
they're cash buyers, and they can afford to pay a little bit more,
Yeah.
and close in 30 days or 60 days.
No home inspections,
No
no
inspections,
nothing.
no financing contingencies, and if you're a seller, that's tough to pass up.
Yeah.
So I think you're exactly right. It is going to be a generational. I think it already is.
It
I
is.
think it's going
It's
to.
just not being talked about yet.
It's going to continue and grow. We have. You talked about
by
this
the
last
way,
week.
when I gave her money for a down payment, she said she loved me.
I bet she did. It's one of those things we have to work hard to not have, split our community between the older generation and the younger generation.
But I think you're going to start
So-
seeing votes going that
Sure.
way.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Natalie being elected to the city council, that's a generational change
Well,
right there.
She was the top vote, right?
Right.
Oh, she
absolutely.
was the top vote.
Yes,
Yeah,
top
and
vote, yeah.
also,
And-
being straightforward here, also an indication that the antithesis of Natalie, which was Bob Fenwick, probably was not the most electable candidate. If you're going to run someone that's anti-upzoning, and I'm not trying to throw shade on Mr. Fenwick here, you're probably not going to want to throw Mr. Fenwick on the ticket. There were other candidates that perhaps were more electable. Not taken away from Natalie Oshrin winning. I agree with your
Yeah.
point. That was a generational movement right there.
Yeah, but I think if you look at her and Payne, they
Oh, they're the same.
The two of them are
The same.
Yeah.
It's and in a good way.
Vote-wise,
I think
though,
it's
vote
I think it's been really good to hear younger voices. I think Michael Payne's brings a new, fresh perspective, and I think that's been very important to the city. I don't know that we would have necessarily been where we are with this. The other person, and he knows I say this all the time, I think Rory Stolzenberg joining the Planning Commission was one of the most fundamental changes to the city because he, young, brash, smart, got all the data right at his hands and not afraid to speak up in favor of housing and in favor of the younger generation and the renters who need a place to come. That I saw that happen in my practice when he showed up. You talked about young people showing up. he and Michael Gillikin showed up at
Matthew,
excuse me,
yeah.
Showed up at a planning commission and then city council meetings on a project we worked on about probably 5 or 6 years ago now, over on 10th Street in the old Martha Jeff neighborhood. And we were like, who are these guys and where did they come from? They were so articulate. They spoke so passionately about the need for housing for younger people and people who weren't there to speak for themselves because they didn't have a house yet.
But that planning commission meeting, a lot of people showed up at that age.
Oh, no, not at that.
No, he's talking back in the day.
I think it was 2017 or 18.
Yeah.
But they were the only ones. And I think that may have been the first time anyone ever showed up making comments like that. And that was a big change. And then relatively soon thereafter, Roy was appointed to the Planning Commission, and that's made a big difference. And then you have people like Lyle come along, and others who are on the Planning Commission now who recognize, look at the Planning Commission now. Oh. It's much, much different than it was even 4 years ago.
Well, it's to your point, it's kind of crazy to say this because I think we're all geeks for this, but it's now become cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's part of the vernacular, the vocabulary.
Right.
And I think it's also because of social media, because the content has gone from acronyms and a level of sophistication where you may need a law degree or you may need to be a specialist to now the content's out there and it's readable and findable and digestible and people can get educated really quickly. So that's the point you're making.
Are you telling me I didn't need to print this out?
That's really no. But the difference is a lot more readable.
Yeah.
It certainly will be in final form, but it's much more readable and understandable than the existing ordinance, and the pictures really do help.
Absolutely. From that perspective, it is a appealing looking ordinance compared to a bunch of text that you need a lawyer, with all due respect, to interpret it.
Can we talk covenants and restrictions?
We will in a second, please. But
please.
So on Monday, to put a pin in this, on Monday I've got Maggie Gunnels. We're going to talk Lake Monticello, and I've got another agent going to go out there, and we're going to kind of tackle what happened out there with the voting of this Board of LMOA board, but in big picture
You're talking the HOA?
The HOA, but in big picture of that, I've been living there since 1987. Just talk about the shift of thinking. They got nearly 40% of 4,500 lot owners to vote. I would have told you 2 years ago or 2 months ago or 2 weeks ago, you couldn't get those folks to vote that tomorrow is Saturday, nevertheless, to show up. So I think there's a shift. But we want to talk covenants and restrictions. We tackled it last Friday, and you're an expert, so I'll let Jerry tee it up.
I don't know about that, but...
So I'll set the stage.
Sure.
Okay. There's an extremely heavy hitter that watches this program that we've afforded anonymity to him. And why we forwarded an anonymity to him is because of his contribution to the program and his impact in this community.
Okay.
And he lives in the city, his family does, and he's extremely anti-upzoning.
Okay.
Extremely. Extremely deep-pocketed, and extremely sophisticated by utilizing the law to his advantage. And this particular individual, his nickname is Deep Throat. We take a pull from the Washington Post.
Yeah.
Okay. And Woodward and Bernstein. And Deep Throat has led the charge of taking homes in the city. 28 of them have been done so far. And creating covenants and restrictions associated with homes in the city. Hired expensive attorneys to make this process a reality. And is basically, what's the phrase here? You're the expert here.
Yeah, so let me simplify it a little bit. So what they have done is they have put covenants and restrictions on that piece of property, or they're attempting to do that, to any future buyer would not be able to do
to subdivide or
do anything that's in this document.
So they're buying up lots and doing that, or they're convincing owners?
Current homes and convincing other neighbors adjacent to their property. And the 28 that have been done, he did say this puts things really in perspective. Those 28 did not have a financing vehicle or a mortgage on their respective homes.
So the debate that we had...
So that shows the level of affluence and wealth, and probably homogenous demographic we're talking here.
And for the benefit of the viewers, if you have a mortgage or a deed of trust on your property, you have to get your lender's approval, written consent for that.
Well,
I would
there was a
absolutely-
lender, multiple lenders were watching the program,
Oh.
and it was a damn good show. And they said, the reality is we cannot police this. If you were to change the covenants restrictions on the house, and the likelihood of us calling your mortgage would be zero as long as the payments are still made on time. And one lender even
That's probably
said,
fair.
one lender even said that what these folks are doing would almost strengthen the relationship we have with them, because they're basically promising that they're not going to convert the home into anything multifamily investment, which is part of the mortgage setup
Right.
that they have.
But the
Interesting.
risk that you take is the document that you sign, and you do enough of this, you are promising not to do that without notifying them. So you run the risk.
The brokers, the financing folks have said the likelihood of this being called is
But-
zero.
Perhaps, but
Yeah.
they still
Well,
could.
there's nothing
They
ever
still could.
zero.
Right.
It still could, right. Yeah,
The
still
logic
could.
I follow for sure, but I've heard of that, and I've seen a deed that was recorded, I want to say, in the last 10 or 15 years that sounds very similar.
Mm-hmm.
I'm shocked that people would do that.
Well, I'll put this in perspective and I'll get out of your way.
Yeah.
This is prior to meeting my wonderful wife. This is a decade ago. I bought a home in Redfields with my girlfriend at the time. Shared ownership, dual income to purchase. The relationship ended up not working out. We decided to cash out, where I paid a lump sum, and then I obtained ownership of the house. And the deed that was recorded to indicate that cash lump sum was clearly documented.
that's
the
not-
financing vehicle, you would say, the letter of the law to the mortgage would say I would have to let them know about that. I did not, and nothing was called.
And I get that, but it wasn't a deed restriction. There's a difference.
There is a difference.
Yeah.
But I did change what was initially agreed
So
to.
let's
in the
let
mortgage.
Valerie
But
jump in. So
focusing
why
on-
would you not want to do that?
Because if you don't support adding more units on your lot, don't add more units on your lot. But to restrict the ability of a future owner to do it voluntarily only lowers the value of your property. Even if you would
would
never
agree
do
with
it, and even if you sold your house to someone who promised that they would, maybe it's a condition of sale, that they wouldn't develop it, the property's worth a lot more without a deed restriction on it than it is with it. And so for that reason alone, the other reason, at least in my opinion, I'm obviously not an appraiser or a realtor, but
Play devil's
that's
advocate
what,
with you
but
on
here's the situation where I saw this deed. Someone I know in town who owns a lot in the city that's quite large, and under the draft zoning is designated, it may have been R3, or it may have been even high density.
Okay.
You could put some more units on
got
it. But he had bought the house in the last few years, sent me a copy of the deed restriction that he knew was there. He never envisioned that there'd be an opportunity to do more on his lot. Sent it to me and he says, "Is there any way I can get out of this?" The answer was no, practically, because at least the one I saw, and there were probably 10 or 15 owners on the same deed. And it said something to the effect of, the only way you can remove this from your property
original declarant.
is with the majority vote of all of the parties to this deed or any other deeds like it that are recorded in the city.
So
well,
I-
how do you ever then
Yeah.
to prove
So
that
I-
you,
let-
it's
let-
impossible. So
Impossible.
you're
Let-
never
let-
going to get out of it.
Supervisor Price watching the program.
Let's play a scenario, right? I don't know. Pick an affluent street in
How
Charlottesville.
about Rugby Road?
Rugby Road.
Blue Ridge
Rugby Road.
Road.
I'm sorry.
Blue Ridge Road.
Blue Ridge Road. I own a home on Blue Ridge Road. I'm very fortunate to have paid it all
Oh,
off. I don't
yeah.
own anything on
Blue
it.
Ridge Road.
None of this is true, by the way. But I put a deed restriction on it. My wife and I put a deed restriction on it. We may put
Certainly
it in
have every right to do so.
Absolutely. We may put it in a trust, right? Because we're smart. We're going to put it in a trust. My wife and I die.
Mm-hmm.
What happens next, Coach?
Well, it depends on what your trust agreement says in
There you
terms
go.
of who, if your daughter or son were to inherit or be the beneficiaries under your trust, they would have the benefit of having this beautiful home on Blue Ridge Road.
But they wanna sell it.
But if they wanted to sell it, or maybe they want to subdivide it under the new ordinance because maybe their sibling wants.
greedy.
No, maybe they have
Yeah, I get
a
it,
grown
yeah.
child
Yeah,
who
yeah,
wants to
sure.
live there. Maybe they have a nanny that they want to be able to live on their home, on their property with them. They
Or
wouldn't
maybe
be
I
able to do
pass
it.
away and they want to do
A granny flat for your wife.
There you go.
Exactly.
There you
That
go.
was that was where I was going, but I think you said you both died, so I didn't use
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I
But
agree-
yeah,
agree
they
to that.
now can't do that. Or if they wanted to sell it,
Yeah.
if that type of family comes along that wants to be able to do that, they're not going to buy that.
Deed
They're going to buy the one.
restrictions are very slippery slopes.
I agree. They're permanent,
And they're
unless
permanent.
you provide very, very specific, clear, easy to define mechanisms for how they can be removed, which at least in this one instrument that I read was impossible. And so,
I've written dozens and dozens and dozens of CNRs on my projects, and they are always very one-sided, right? They're always one-sided toward the declarant.
Sure.
They're done that way.
you've got to
'cause
be able to control the
you gotta be able to
project
control
until
the
you
project
finish
and all
it.
that stuff. And then you're away from them.
Right.
In order for them to change, I have to go back and fix them. They have to find me
Wow.
to go ahead and fix them because I'm the declarant still.
Right.
The declarant doesn't transfer. Now, if it transferred to an HOA, that's a
Right.
whole different animal.
Right.
But then the HOA then
That's probably harder than finding you.
that it would be much harder than finding me on that end of it. So it's a look. We're all professionals here. You know, if somebody asks us this question, you have to advise them if they've got a loan on it. You know, technically, you're supposed to notify your lender.
Absolutely.
You can choose not to do that.
Yeah.
That's your decision. But if somebody picks up the phone and you end up getting called a loan, you can get yourself into a little bit of trouble.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not just financial trouble.
And it's unfortunate because obviously it's an end run around the ordinance. Again, everybody has the right to do that if they want to, but it's unfortunate that it's a short-term
It's a Band-Aid.
it's a short-term barrier to implementing the goals, the very worthy goals of the ordinance, but it's an impact. It will continue for generations, and it's
Unless the language is clear.
So I'm going to do an example.
Sure, depends on how it's written.
I'm going to do an example. Our daughter who bought a home in the west end of Richmond, their CNRs, their recorded deed, flat out says no African Americans
Oh.
can ever buy that house.
My old house on Yorktown Drive had the very same thing.
And my daughter was working with Bill Tucker, one of our great sponsors here,
Right.
and said, I want to change this. And he goes, you can't. Unless the state change
Well,
says,
there's now a mechanism you can under state law.
oh,
Yeah, you can go back and have them removed from your deed.
That's another
So, I mean,
way.
they're not enforceable under Supreme Court rulings.
Sure.
But,
But it's
they're
there,
still
though.
there. Yeah,
Yeah.
and when I was, I don't remember how old I was, but when we bought our first house and reviewing the title work, and I did read the covenants, unlike most people, it was there. Now, the title company had put a big red stamp on it that said not enforceable. We knew that anyway, but it was still there.
Yeah.
And it's just, when we sold our
gross.
house,
We'll
when
have
we
to
sold
talk
our
about how
house,
we
it was
can get
still
that
there.
removed later.
And so
You're
Anyway.
amazing. You got to come back.
I would love to. This has
is
been
an
really fun.
Hour and 18 minutes of just, pleasure and
Yeah.
information.
Well, thank you.
I would call this a masterclass.
You are
Ah.
seriously a pro's pro.
Well, thank you. Well, it's fun stuff.
And we didn't even get into all
I
our
know we
pages.
hardly talked about the ordinance,
You're
right?
great.
I have
You're
it
made for
here,
a
so
talk show.
maybe I have to come back. No, I think, Keith said we're both geek out on this. I very much am so.
Well, all three of us, though.
But when you live and breathe it, and we have clients who are really working hard to try and bring units to the city. And there's a lot of interest in investing in the city. I try to reiterate that.
I think
it's-
in closing, this is going to
Yeah.
happen, some version of it. I'm going to lose my
I-
bet for sure, I think, on it.
I don't know.
I just don't think it's
I
going
like top shelf bourbon.
I know you do.
Ragged
You
branch.
like
be nice.
top shelf everything.
Buffalo Chase,
Yeah.
is that the one?
Buffalo Trace, if you can find.
He
Ragged
likes top
branch is
shelf
local.
everything.
I do. Champagne taste.
I just don't. It may be a slow roll. It may be 5 or 10 years down the road. It is not going to have an immediate impact on it. It's going to take a
But-
long time.
Perhaps, but it's better than nothing, right? It's a start, and maybe it starts slow, and maybe interest rates come down, and it picks up a little bit more, and maybe, you do it and don't go broke, and maybe then your neighbor sees,
I've already done that, by the way.
maybe I'll try that too. I don't know. That's why, people will say I'm biased, and I acknowledge that. That's why I think it's so important that in the mixed-use districts that you get it right, so that those projects can move forward as well, much faster, knowing that this might, in the residential districts, it might be slower than some people would like.
Well, I think ultimately it's going to get approved, and then only time is going to tell, and we'll have a conversation 5 years from now and
Yeah.
say, okay, what worked and what didn't work, and do
Yeah.
that. But Valerie,
Yeah.
thank you so much for doing this. I just looked at the
Thank
clock
you.
for the first time, and we're way over what we're supposed to be.
I didn't know what the stop time was
No
supposed
rules
to be,
here.
but
No rules,
great.
no rules.
You're the boss, you get to set them, huh?
No rules. Valerie Long, guys, she's the partner at Williams Mullen. I think you can count on her for any kind of legal work you need. Valerie Long, partner at Williams Mullen. Judah Wickhauer is the director and producer. Props to you. Keith Smith, the namesake of the
Extraordinaire.
show. Real Talk with Keith Smith.
you.
Looks great in pink. I got to give you some props.
Thank
on
you.
that.
Yes.
Thank you. we have interviews.
And I wore my complimentary
I know, you
color
guys
since I
match.
was
I
gonna be
should have
sitting
worn
by
pink.
him.
I wish I had the memo.
We may have texted.
I doubt you texted about what you were wearing. Okay. This is the little BS over there. Real Talk with KeithSmith.com.
My mouth's moving.
Right. Real Talk with KeithSmith.com. The I Love CVille show, guys, is up in 55 minutes, and we got some big time news to drop. Tune in 55 minutes. Thank you kindly for joining us. So long, everybody.
Have a great
Thanks.
weekend, everybody.
He's going to tell us, Valerie, when the mics are off here.